What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Eric Wilson, today joined by my co-host, Anthony Rivardo. Today, we've got a couple of players that we're here to talk about. They include Braden Schneider, a couple of prospects, and Ryan Lindgren. It's been a couple of days since we've recorded. We're in the dead part of the offseason, so things are going a little bit slow, but recently the Rangers did make a couple of moves. They signed Schneider and prospects Matthew Robertson to new contracts, so we're here to talk about them, go over the signings, kind of review how we feel about them. And then also at the end, we do want to address the Ryan Lindgren situation. Ever since he did file for arbitration, there is some talk in the work. Seems like the only thing holding back that contract is the term at this point. So we'll give our thoughts on that too. But before we really get into that, make sure you guys like, subscribe, ring that bell so you don't miss notification. Leave your thoughts on these contracts down in the comment section below. And lastly, be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. But before we really get into it, Anthony, how are you doing today, my friend? And then I guess which contract would you like to talk about first?
I'm doing great. It's been slow, as you mentioned, for the New York Rangers. Not a lot of news going on, but slowly but surely, Chris Drury is making a few moves. And recently he seemed focused on the defensive core, kind of shaking that up, making some changes. Who knows if that's a result of kind of planning for the future post Jacob Trouba? And we've heard that Trouba now maybe might have some interest in going to Buffalo, but probably not. I don't know. Apparently he blocked the trade to Detroit, even though the Rangers assumed that's where he wanted to go. Who knows what's going on with Jacob Trouba? We know that as a result of the Trouba drama, the Rangers locker room is a little bit messy. But right now, it seems like they're not focusing on Trouba. They're focusing on everyone surrounding Trouba. Who's going to be skating alongside him, who's going to be skating behind him on the third defensive pairing, all of that good stuff, who the prospects are. So the Rangers have made a couple of key signings and extensions, and right now they're trying to get another extension done, though they seem to have hit a roadblock with Ryan Lindgren. And I think that's probably what I want to dive into first, because if you go based on the report from Vince Mercogliano about Ryan Lindgren, Eric, it's interesting because the AAV seems to be right where we wanted. It's around 3.6 to 4 million. It's a pretty reasonable deal. But the Rangers are adamant that they don't want to make it a long-term deal. They want to sign him to a bridge deal similar to the ones that they signed Capo Caco and Alexi Lafreniere to in recent seasons. They want Lindgren on a bridge deal. Lindgren wants a long-term extension, and that's ultimately where the point of tension is stemming from. And so I guess I do kind of want to get your take. Do you think that the Rangers are right to try and push for this bridge deal? Would you like to see the bridge deal, or would you rather see the long-term deal? I think that when we discussed it a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned that they should make a long-term deal because his price is probably going to go up as time goes on. But I think what the Rangers are thinking is they want to be able to get out of this contract as soon as possible so that they can pay other players like Lafreniere, Igor Shesterkin, and Keandre Miller. So I guess it's kind of an interesting open topic of debate. How long should this contract be for? What is your take on it?
I would say I'm kind of in the middle on it, not in the sense of like I'm torn between a short-term deal and a long-term deal. I would just prefer like a medium length deal. You know, I'm kind of tired of these bridge deals, which I'll get into a little bit more when we talk about the Schneider contract. But at the same time, I also don't know if we can afford to keep Lindgren on like an 8-year extension. So I do have here from the Fireside Rangers Instagram that we got going that everyone should be following. Someone commented earlier, and I fully agree with this comment. It's from Jonah Rotman. He said about an hour ago, Lindgren is the only true shutdown defenseman we have right now. And with an inflating market, getting a $4 million 5-year contract would be a smart move to make to lock up a top-end semi-younger defenseman. And I think that's perfect. You know, we talk about the value of the contracts. We, you know, Lindgren's looking for hopefully around 3.6, like Vince Mercogliano reported, could be as high as 4 million. He wants a longer-term deal. The Rangers would like a shorter one, but I honestly think 5 years is a pretty good number, either 4 or 5. Last thing I want to see is have this guy locked up for only 2 seasons, plays really, really good, and then 2 years from now we have to deal with the same problem, only pay him even more money. As the comment noted, it is an inflating market. The longer we wait, the more we're going to have to pay him, larger chunk of the salary cap. So, and then at the same time, I see the argument. Lindgren is a little bit injury prone. You don't want to lock him up for too long just in case something happens and his career declines like we saw with Mark Stahl in the past. So I think a 5-year contract worth around $4 million. I fully agree with that comment from our Instagram. Then I have to say it has my vote of confidence, and I would prefer like that kind of like mid-range deal. Nothing too short, nothing too long, just nice, easy medium.
Yeah, and I think that's completely valid and a good take to have. My thing is with Lindgren, I guess one argument that you can make for the bridge deal is you could sign him to this 2-year deal, and then after the first season, once you go into that second year of the deal, you could probably trade him and recoup some good assets, and whichever team trades for him either views him as a rental or maybe signs him to a long-term extension thereafter. So in some ways, the Rangers could make this short-term investment into Lindgren and then turn it into a more long-term investment by trading him away the following season and getting extra picks or extra cap space or maybe just a younger, better player. But I don't know. I think that Ryan Lindgren skating alongside Adam Fox, he is one of the Rangers' best defensemen. He's a stay-at-home guy. He plays well on the defensive zone of the ice, and I think that the Rangers need more of that. I feel like K'Andre Miller and Adam Fox, like these guys get forward and contribute quite a bit offensively, but they also have a lot of variance in their play. And of course, we know how much variance and inconsistency plagues Jacob Trouba's performances. So I think that having at least one defenseman in those pairings who's just really good staying at home and being a defensive presence is important. So I don't want to see Ryan Lindgren go anywhere. I think that he should be a long-term building block. And in fact, I know that it was reported in that Marcoliano article that the Rangers have the K'Andre Miller contract in mind and some others in next offseason. I think I'd prefer to prioritize Ryan Lindgren in some ways over K'Andre Miller. And maybe that's a hot take, but I like the way that Lindgren plays, and I think he's still young, and long-term, he could end up being a more valuable player to the Rangers than K'Andre Miller. I don't know if you have an opinion on that or a take, or maybe you want to rip my take to shreds, but I like Lindgren, and I also do like K'Andre Miller, but if I had to prioritize one of the two, it's pretty close, and I might actually lean Ryan Lindgren.
Yeah, that's a tough one because, I like both defensemen, Miller and Lindgren, and I think Lindgren is a better defenseman. He's more consistent, but he's only consistent when he's actually playing. When he gets injured quite a bit, they're like, I can't remember the last time he's played a full 82-game season. I don't know if he ever has, honestly, off the top of my head. Probably not. Whereas K'Andre Miller, I can't even think of a single time where he was injured. So there's a lot of different variables there to consider because I think Lindgren is more skilled defensively. Miller obviously a little bit has more of an offensive touch to his game, but he's always healthy, larger guy, can definitely lean into the physical aspect of his game using his size if he chooses to. I know he hasn't much in his career, but that could be an easy change. So I don't know. If I'm Chris Drury, I would say prioritize Lindgren, but definitely keep the Miller thing in mind because I don't want to see either defenseman go. I think they're both key members of the Rangers defensive core. So that's at least the way I look at it. I think Lindgren's a building block to this team. He plays great with Adam Fox. His defensive abilities allow Fox to go up and do the things that he does in the offensive zone. So keeping them both around is definitely a top priority, though, I will have to say.
I agree with that. And in some ways, I guess that probably plays into Drury's strategy here, where in order to keep them both long-term, you probably do have to sign Lindgren to this bridge deal first and foremost. But again, I think that signing these young players to these long-term deals and watching the cap go up, watching the average salaries for those players continue to rise, you end up with a bargain if you sign Lindgren to this maybe a 4x4 into a 4-year contract, 4 years. Or a 4-year contract with $4 million per year. That feels like a really good value contract because in 2 years' time, he's probably looking for a $5-6 million contract. So I think that you get a hometown discount in some ways if you sign the player now to a long-term deal, and that almost seems to be what Lindgren wants. However, there are concerns about injuries and other things and cap flexibility. So I think that the Rangers are going to keep pushing for this bridge deal, but I do wonder how many bridge deals they can sign before they start running into trouble. Like they signed Lafreniere to that bridge deal, and now they have to pay him in a big way next offseason. Had they signed him more long-term, I know there was a lot with Lafreniere, a lot of question marks, so it probably was a good thing that they signed him to the bridge deal. But had they signed him long-term, they'd probably be playing with a real bargain in Alexis Lafreniere. But then you see the other side of it where they signed Capo Caco to the bridge deal, and that was the right decision because he hasn't turned into the star necessarily that Lafreniere has become. So I think it's an interesting situation that's playing out. We'll see ultimately what the Rangers and Lindgren decide on and what they agree to. But if it were up to me, I'm making Lindgren a top priority and trying to get him on the books long term.
Yeah, most definitely. And I do want to quickly start to talk about the Braden Schneider contract because you do bring up the market and the inflation and cashing in on long-term deals. And that's how I feel about the Schneider one. I know a couple episodes ago, when the reports were saying that the Schneider contract would likely be around 2 to 3 years, around 2.5 million. And in that video, I was like, yeah, I'd be pretty happy with that. And then, the official contract comes out, it's 2 years and it's 2.2 million AAV. So it's even cheaper than we expected when I said it was happy. And I don't want to say it's a bad contract. I think it's a phenomenal contract, having a defenseman like Schneider, who's also pretty good, defensively, rather than just focusing on recording points. Having him that cheap, it's nice. The thing that bothers me is just the term. We're already getting screwed because of this Lafreniere bridge deal, and that could be in its own video topic. And I fear that the same thing might happen with Braden Schneider, where he's already in the process of breaking out and becoming a solid defenseman. I honestly don't even see him being on the third pairing this year. I think he's going to go up and play with Keandre Miller, and then Zach Jones will play with Jacob Trouba on the third pairing. So, give it 2 years from now. Schneider's only going to get better. The market's only going to get more expensive. And now 2 years from now, we have another big name player that's probably going to be asking for even more money. I would have liked to see a lot more term on this deal, just so we don't have to worry about that. And I know the Jack Hughes contract is always the comparison that I make, but now it's gotten even worse. There's another comparison that I can make. Yesterday, the Los Angeles Kings signed Quentin Byfield to a pretty large contract. To everyone watching who doesn't remember, Byfield went second overall, right behind Alexis Lafreniere. And he's kind of had the same story as Lafreniere, struggled most of his career, had a pretty good 50-point season last year, and then boom, right away, Kings lock him up 5 years, over 6 million. I think it's, what is it right here? 6.25 million. Give it 4 years from now, that's going to be one of the best contracts in the entire NHL, because Byfield's only going to get better and better, and they don't have to pay him that much because they signed him right away. Now with the Lafreniere situation, Lafreniere is going to be asking for much more than that after this season now. So the market's only getting higher and higher as far as forwards go, and it's going to do the same thing as defensemen. So as far as the Schneider contract goes, love the price tag on it. Very cheap, very good. Would have really liked to see more term though, because at the 2 years, I think it's going to come back to bite us 2 years from now. So I don't know how you feel any different.
I don't really feel all that different. Again, I'm in agreement with you, which I know is kind of boring that we both feel the same way. But with Schneider, I think that it's an important signing to keep a core member of your defense together. Sure, I'd rather see it long term and have this core member locked in for the long haul. But at the end of the day, it's not necessarily the same caliber of player as Lindgren, like we were just discussing. In my mind, I think that Schneider does different things on the ice and is a different player for this team in terms of his importance. But one of the things that you do have to admire about him is that he's very dependable. He played in 81 games in 2022-23 and 82 games in 23-24. So he is one of those players that you do want around and you do want to lock in and keep him on the ice because he's always available. And I think that's really important. The Rangers have dealt with a lot of injuries in their defensive core over the past few years, and Braden Schneider being a constant in the lineup is very important. And in fact, we'll talk more about some of those injuries as we talk about prospect that they recently signed and some others who could be pushing for ice time this year. But with Schneider always being available and being on the ice, it does improve or increase the value that he brings to this team. So I am really happy to see that the Rangers got a deal done and to see that Schneider will not be going anywhere and that he'll be sticking with the team, at least for the short term.
Yeah, I mean, he'll definitely be here at least 2 years. I think Schneider's one of those players where he probably will never be like a superstar. We're never going to talk about him like we do Adam Fox, but he is going to be one of those players where like 7-8 years from now, he might still be a member of this defensive core. I could see him being a long-term Ranger, solid lockdown defenseman once, all of our current guys like Jacob Trouba are gone, whenever that might be, whether it be now or, a couple of years from now if he retires. I still see Schneider being around. So I don't want to like bash the deal. I still think it's really good just because of that low price point, especially with the Shesterkin and the Lafreniere contracts and the Miller one coming up over the next couple seasons. So, you got to save money, and the more term you give, the more money you're going to give. So I don't hate it. I hate the repetition that we're going through of I just keep seeing these bridge deals just being handed out. And, as far as like Kakko goes, it's working because Kakko hasn't forced us to pay him more. But sometimes when you make a like prove it type of deal like we did with Lafreniere. Sometimes they prove it a little bit too much, and now you got to give them too much money. So I don't know. But lastly, the last player we got to talk about is Robertson, Rangers prospect. He's yet to make his NHL debut. However, of all the young defensemen in the Rangers prospect pool, I would say he's probably the most talented, just because we don't have that much defensive talent in our prospects pool. I was looking at the Hartford roster earlier today when preparing for the video, and you got like a couple veterans like Connor Mackey, Ben Harper, guys that we've seen play in the NHL with the Rangers and did not perform very well. And then other than that, I would probably say it's Robertson. You know, I don't see him playing in the NHL this season, but I'll get into that in a second. First, we've got to talk about like the price of the deal. 1 year deal, two-way contract, which for those who don't know, a two-way contract just means depending on what league he's playing in, he'll be making a different amount of money. But if he is playing in the NHL, it's a league minimum deal, $775,000, cheapest they could possibly have ever gotten him. So I think it's a good signing. But as I was saying before, I don't think we're going to see him play throughout this 1 year. Right now, we already have our solid defensive lines: Lindgren, Fox, Miller, Schneider, Jones, Trouba. If any one of them get injured, you're going to see Chad Ruhwedel slide in there. Someone else gets injured, I think we see Harper or Mackey first. And fingers crossed, knock on wood, there's even more injuries. That's when you would see Robertson hit the ice. So, like, it's a signing you have to make just for the AHL squad. Maybe a few years from now, he'll be an NHL player, but I don't know. I haven't really been too impressed by him throughout his career so far. So I don't know. To me, mediocre signing. You had to get it done for the AHL squad. It's not going to be like a game-changing move by Drury or anything. So just good job, Drury, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's an important signing for the Hartford roster, for the Wolfpack, but it doesn't really make much of an impact on this New York Rangers team. Maybe it could long term. He's still a young player. He was only drafted in the second round in 2019, 23 years old. Last season, he had 4 goals and 17 assists, so put up some decent points for the Wolfpack. But with Robertson, it just feels like he's too buried down in the depths to make any impact in the NHL this season. I mean, we're talking, I know you and I were texting about it, Eric, where we were like, okay, could he be this year's Zach Jones? Zach Jones was a prospect, was playing for the Wolfpack last year, got elevated onto the roster when Trouba went down and received a lot of playing time, played in 31 games, and then was a healthy scratch for the entire postseason. So clearly they view Zach Jones as a future piece of this defensive core, which also might tie into the Ryan Lindgren conversation, or even the Braden Schneider conversation with these bridge deals. Maybe they think that Jones could take over one of those roles in the future, but that's totally different. With Robertson, could he be this year's Zach Jones? Could he maybe get some NHL skate time if, you know, there is an injury in the defensive core? But I don't really think he will, because Zach Jones will be first in line. Zach Jones might even start this year, and then they signed. Yeah, he should start this year unless they make some sort of deal between now and the start of the regular season. He'll probably be starting for the Rangers in their defensive core. But then who's behind him? I'm going to butcher his name. Ruhwedel, right?
Ruhwedel.
He's probably going to be that next man up instead of Matthew Robertson. So I don't know if Robertson's path to making it into the NHL lineup is very clear unless the Rangers do sustain an influx of injuries to their defensive core, which really isn't out of the question for this team. They have a lot of injuries every single year, and they seem to get the worst possible luck every single year when it comes to injuries. So potentially we could see Robertson, although I just think he's a little bit too low in the priority list of depth pieces to actually get onto the NHL ice.
Yeah, I don't see it happening. And I know he's still young. He's only 23. So there's plenty of time to see what happens. As far as like I know, just based on like reading about him, because I don't really watch the Hartford games, if I'm being honest. Like he's a pretty good like offensive defenseman. He's made large jumps offensively, especially last season, but his defensive ability just isn't there. And I'm kind of scared he might just be like the next Jacob Trouba. So I don't know. Like he still has time to develop. Like I said, only 23, which I did just learn he was born exactly 1 week after me. So I kind of like him a little bit more now because we got close birthdays. But you know, maybe he could be like a Johnny Brodzinski type of player, spend most of his career down in the AHL just because he's never been good enough to make that jump, but he'd be like the best player in the entire AHL. And then maybe later in his career, if the Rangers or whatever team he's with at that point need him, that's when he gets his big break and becomes a regular roster player. So I don't want to say I'd be shocked if we see him make his debut this season. Obviously, anything's possible. Maybe someone gets injured or someone's a scratch, and the Rangers prefer to give younger talent a better look rather than guys like Ben Harper. But I'm leaning towards we probably won't see him. It's just a contract you had to get done. You know, you got to have a certain amount of players signed to each team, and we got him for the league minimum, so can't really complain. But that about wraps up my thoughts.
Yeah, maybe because it is a two-way deal, as you mentioned earlier, they do envision him getting some sort of NHL ice time. That could be kind of one takeaway that you can have from the contract, but I think we're in agreement at the end of the day. Robertson is a decent player for the AHL, but we're not really depending on him if he does get any NHL ice time, and we're probably a little bit nervous if he does, but maybe he'll get some at some point, and perhaps he could be this year's Zach Jones. I don't think so, though. I will say, though, I'm excited to see Zach Jones. I think that he skates well, and I think that he should have gotten some playing time during the NHL postseason that the Rangers were in as Trouba continued to stink things up. I think that Zach Jones should have gotten at least some sort of ice time, but this year he probably will, and I do think it's important, or I think it's encouraging, rather, that the Rangers have succession plans in place now for Trouba and some of these other guys. Like, they are starting to build together young defensemen who could step in long-term once some of these veterans depart, like Jacob Trouba, like Zach Jones should be able to take over Trouba's spot in the future, as he did for those 31 games last season. So the Rangers don't really have the strongest defensive pool of prospects, but they do have a few young guys that, if they continue to develop and prioritize, they should be able to take over some starting jobs in the near future, especially Zach Jones, who should probably take over a starting job immediately with the departure of Eric Gustafsson.
Yeah. The defensive core is a weird one. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe out of nowhere, the Rangers will just sign EJ Emery to his entry-level contract, and the 18-year-old will just fill in, just be a superstar right off the bat. Who knows? But I think I've about shared all my thoughts. Are you good, Anthony? All right. Well, it was a pleasure talking about these new Rangers signings and the one that potentially might be coming up soon with you all. So if you guys did enjoy, please make sure that you like, subscribe, and you ring that bell so you don't miss notification on future videos, which will be coming soon. Forgot to say it in the intro, but we did not forget about the 2K subscriber live. I almost just spoiled what it was. But no one's watching this deep into a video, so it doesn't matter. 2K special coming soon. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. Have a good one, and let's go Rangers.